Let's talk about the camera node in Ventuz today. So to do that, like always, I will go here to a new scene. I already prepared a little scene. Hey, yes, because, so we save a bit time because I really just want to focus on this specific nodes in this tutorial. Let's also switch here to our logic view. So as you can see, I have here a simple stage with a floor, with a cube, a little bit material, some stairs, a car model, and here a live input from my webcam. And what we also have here in the center, that's basically our scene root, right? So this shows the position of X, Y, and Z 0. Yeah, they are all zeroed out. So this is basically our scene root. So that means whatever I put here inside there, let's create just a cube. So that cube will be exactly here in that 0. Okay, and that's 0 in the scene root basically, and that's important to know to explain the camera. So I added here one camera already, but let me also delete that first. So then as you see, once I delete that camera, nothing changed. So that means in Ventuz, if you have a default scene, or if you don't have a camera in your scene, then Ventuz will basically add a default camera, and that default camera is at position x0, y0, and z minus 30. Yeah, so that's important, so that we add something in the scene root here, right? That we also can see something. So you can find the camera in the toolbox under the world category, and down here you find the camera. So let's add that camera somewhere here on top. And once we add a camera, then we can see we get a red dot. That means this is now our active camera. If we check now here on the right side our properties, our view properties. I will talk about the projection soon, but then you can see position X is 0, position Y is 0, and position Z is minus 30, right? So if I move that to 0 now, then we are exactly in the center, or basically in the middle of our scene center, right? And again, if I delete this camera now, then you can see Ventuz will add a default camera, which is exactly at the same position like if we add our own camera. Okay, that's important to understand. So let's do that again. Let's add here our camera. Let's call it cam 1. That's all good. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about here that properties in the camera, right? So under projection, we have a couple of properties. We have here, for example, the relation. We have the near and the far clipping, right? So I will talk about that also very soon. Then we have the aspect. We have the aspect relation. We have the field of view, and we have the field of view axis. And we can basically offset field of view here by X and Y in percentage, right? Um, and of course, under the view, then we have the position of our camera in X and Y. We can pan the camera, we can tilt the camera, right? And we also can roll the camera, okay? So if we start again from top to bottom, right? So if we check here that projection drop down, we have 4 different options. We have the field of view, we have orthogonal view, and we have a tracked view and a matrix. Yeah. So the field of view is the default which most of the cameras will use, because you have that nice perspective view. Then the orthogonal view you can use if you want to have some architectural stuff, if you don't want to have that perspective, right? If you want to have parallel lines all the time. Tracked you will use, or you have to use, if you use, for example, head-mounted displays or tracking system in the broadcast area, right? Basically, the tracked you will need whenever your camera gets the feed or the positions from an external source, right? Like from a virtual reality headset, or a TrackMan system, or Moses tracking system, and stuff like that. Okay, so then you have to change that here. Exactly. Let's quickly talk a bit about that near and far clipping. So let's say we have, let's put in a cube here again, and let's put here an axis. And let's say that cube is very large now. We rotate it a bit so that we get a corner somewhere here. So, and let's bring it close to our camera now, okay? Let's bring that a bit more down, that corner, and maybe, yes. So as closer we come now to the camera, right? At some point, we get that clipping, exactly this one. This is that's the near clipping, basically, right? So sometimes you don't want to have that. So that means sometimes you really want to go to yeah, to make close-ups of objects, right? Um, and to get rid of this, yeah, in certain cases, you simply go here to your camera, then you go here to your near clip and you bring that down, right? And as soon as I bring that down to a certain amount, then that clipping disappears, basically, okay? So this is the near clipping and the far clipping, of course. So, okay, that's all about that. Then again, let's go back to our camera, and here under the projection, we also can set up here our field of view, right? We can yeah, decrease and increase our field of view. We also can change it here from vertical to horizontal if we need so, right? But let's say basically the default values are fine here under the projection. Yeah. So the important stuff is happening here under the view. Yeah, so under the view, you have also different options. You have the pan tilt rolled, you have a look at camera, you have orbit camera, and the same with the tracked and with the metrics, right? So that tracked is also important. If you are using a tracking system and you want to bind a Ventuz camera to that tracking system, then you have to switch your camera to that tracked option, okay? So let's talk now about the pan tilt roll, the look at, and the orbit, yeah? So the pan tilt roll is basically you have a position X, Y, Z where you can position your camera. So let's bring that now maybe a little bit closer. And then we also have that pan, I guess show you before already, and the tilt, and of course the roll. Okay, so I think that's pretty straightforward. Sure, position X, Y, and Z, right? Let's bring it down, and then let's look up a little bit more here to that little old car, right? Exactly. Then we have another option. We have the second view option is the look at. Yeah, so let's reset that values. So a look at has also position X, Y, and Z. We have a roll and we have a target position, right? So that target position is right now. The target position is right now in the scene root. And the scene root is exactly here where I created here that little gizmo. So again, if I bring my camera to 0 in Z, then we are directly in the center. Our lens of the camera is directly in the scene root. Okay, let's bring that back. Let's come a little bit closer here, right? And now let's move the X position. So you can see if I move the camera to the left side or to the right side, the camera will always look at that target point. Okay, so that's the important thing to understand here, right? If I bring it up, the camera will always look to that scene root, to that 0, 0, 0 scene root, basically, right? So if I move my target X now to -1, for example, then you can see now our target is basically -1 in X somewhere here, right? So now the camera will always look to there. Yeah, so depending on your application, depending on your setup, you can choose yeah, by yourself or try and error basically which view will fit your needs. Okay, so let's look at the next one, at the last important view. That's the orbit view. And like the name already says, yeah, so with the orbit view, you basically orbit around a target. As you also can see in the properties, you have yaw, you have pitch, you have roll, you have the distance, and you also have the target X, Y, and Z position, right? Which is by default here in the center. So if we getting closer here to our gizmo, and if I yaw around here, then you can see we are yawing nicely here around that scene center, right? And of course, the same with the pitch. If we do that, then we pitching here nicely around that scene center, right? Exactly. So let's bring that back. And then you also can see we can yaw around. And let's say you want to make a nice camera ride here around that car or around one side of that car, right? Then you pretty much, yeah, you fix your target point, maybe somewhere here. And then you can say, okay, you want to make this right, yeah, this camera right. You can animate that then, um, or make it even interactive, whatever you like, yeah. Exactly. So the next thing what we have in the camera properties are our design eye point. Yeah. So the design eye point is basically, let's say you have a head-mounted display or you have a projection. So you have a projection mapping, for example, and you project something onto a house facade, right? So the projector is at a position to project the content on that facade, but let's say your audience is on a totally different position, right? So the eye point, basically where your audience is looking to, right, to your uh, projection mapping. Or let's use another example. We have a head-mounted display, right, and for a VR application, and the eye point, you want to bring it somewhere behind the character or in front of the character or something like that. So with that, basically, you can say none by default, or you can set up a position, a vector in that case, right? And as you can see, that vector by default is also again in the X, Y, and Z. And as you can see, uh, basically Ventuz will create a light, because that eye point will help you to create nice reflections from a certain point of view, okay, from that eye point. As you can see, if we move that light away now, right, left, right, and so on, then of course the reflections will change a little bit. That car actually looks now ugly because that's import with a PBR texture or PBR materials, and this eye point actually destroys that PBR setup a little bit. But again, it's just to explain you that camera nodes, right? So it's not about to make it super nice. It's really just to give you idea what all that properties means. Okay, so let's turn that off. And of course, you also can set up an anchor somewhere in a scene, which you can move then, and that eye point is always basically taking the position of that anchor then, right? So let's turn that eye point off. So the last thing what we have here is an offset. Again, let's think about a third person game, for example, where you want to offset the camera position, right? So here you also can add simply a matrix, add a matrix here, or you can add translate, basically the translate X, Y, and Z for the camera. And of course, you also can add the rotation, right? Or a rotation, basically, right? So if you need a offset of your camera for whatever reason, then that option is there as well. And of course, you can animate anything. Like every property you can animate, like in every node in Ventus. We will also talk about that in later tutorials when we get into the animation node, for example.